India has a population of about 550 million people. Australia has a population of about 13 million. The population of India is increasing each year by about 13 million. In Australia, most people live in the cities. In India, most live in the villages, and there are said to be 600,000 villages in India. The village of Amapakashi in the north of India has houses of mud, unmade roads and open drains. There's poverty here, as well as dysentery and TB. This village is the chosen home of an Australian.
In a little country town, Kadina in South Australia. When I was 3, we moved to Adelaide, where I went to school at MLC, and then later to the University of Adelaide, to Adelaide Teachers Training College for my BA and Diploma of Teaching. Then I taught for 3 years in country high schools in South Australia and saved up my money so that I could go overseas for 2 years travelling. However, after I'd been overseas for a year or so, I met Mukat in London, and after that forgot all my plans to go back home. He wanted to go back to India and do something, particularly for the villagers, as he'd come from a village himself. And we worked and planned together for 2.5 years, until in 1970 we came back to his own village. I've been here for 5 years now, and I've had to learn a lot. Things are a little bit different here. My husband was born in this little village into a very poor family. But when I met him in England, he told me that he intended to return to this village and do something there to help people.
जो वर्कर अपने फील्ड में जहाँ काम कर रहा है उसको चाहे प्राइमरी एजुकेशन हो चाहे हायर एजुकेशन हो, कुछ इलाके ऐसे हैं डेवलप जहाँ हायर एजुकेशन उसमें भी कमियाँ, तो हमको पहले शुरू से उठाना तो नीचे से.
Not only had he managed to get abroad, but all his thoughts were concentrated on returning to help the people.
और प्रोजेक्ट वर्कर को ध्यान भी करना चाहिए इस बात.
I had a lot to learn and adjust to when I came here first. My husband was always busy organising things to get the project started, and he was never in the village, he was always out in the nearby towns. So I was left alone with the women and children in the house, and of course none of them spoke English. First thing I had to do was change my name, because Jan in Hindi has 2 rather unpleasant meanings, and people would always associate those meanings with my name. So I chose another name beginning with the same letter J, Jyoti, which means light, light of the sun.
What is wrong with Jan?
Well, there is one meaning a very strict and rather way out religious sect, and the other, from Urdu I think, means a courtesan.
And how did you react as a Western woman coming into an Eastern village?
Well, the main problems were mental ones of mental attitudes, because people here live in a very relaxed and take it as it come way. And as a Westerner, although I'm an even-tempered person in a Western situation, in an Eastern situation, to anyone else here, I would look very impatient and demanding and always wanting to know the reason for doing things before agreeing to doing them. Whereas people here are more prepared to do as you say and find out why afterwards. So that from the very beginning, when I was asked to do something that I didn't understand, I would not do it until I understood the reason. And this could be very awkward sometimes. I used to argue a lot in the beginning until I came to realize that if I just slowed down a bit and looked around and came to understand things gradually, then I would see the reason and do them anyway. I made lots of little mistakes when I first came. For example, this is a Hindu country, largely, and a lot of people are vegetarian. When people asked me, had I ever eaten meat, I said honestly that yes, I had when I was a child in my parents' home. Then they asked, had I ever eaten beef? Because, of course, here that is prohibited by law. But I said, yes, I used to eat beef. Well, this created an absolute scandal in the village. Then I had to learn lots of customs associated with the kitchen. For example, you have to take your shoes off when you cook, because everything is done on the floor. And if you're cooking, if you've got to the stage that I am now, where you're cooking the roti, and someone comes, no matter who it is, to your kitchen door, then it's only politeness to ask him to eat. Now, he may or may not eat. It's really only a formality. But because I didn't know this in the early days, I used to say, how can I ask him to eat? There isn't enough food. But of course, this was immaterial. Then I had to learn how to serve food properly to people. This is some of my family, whom I cook for and live with here. It's a little different from a family in Australia because it's a joint family, and we have relatives as well living with us, like Urmila, for example, who is my husband's mother's brother's granddaughter. But she lives with us because there's no school in her village. And Sushma, my husband's daughter by his first marriage. The little one is Tara, my own daughter, 3.5. While the other people are eating and I am serving them, I myself cannot eat. This is because we eat with our hands, our right hand only, but that hand goes in the mouth and is in contact with the mouth all the time, so germs may come on it. So you should not touch anything with your hand, your right hand, that you're giving to others. When you serve food from a bowl into someone else's plate, you have to be very careful that the spoon from that communal bowl doesn't touch someone's individual plate, because then his germs again will come in contact with the general food.
Tara? Khana khao. Bas kha chuke?
Can you remember, Mukat, when your wife was starting to learn the customs? Do you remember what it was like?
Oh, well, it was, I think it was a difficult exercise. She liked to do what the custom was, and she was very much willing to go through it. And I think she learned very quickly, but I can now realize that it was a very difficult thing to do.
The typical house in Amapakashi has 2 or 3 small rooms opening onto a courtyard. The oxen and buffalo are kept in this courtyard when they're not being used in the fields. Here too the women do most of their work, and here the smaller children play. The walls of the houses and the courtyards are mud. Each year the monsoons wash them away, and each year the people rebuild. Dirt and water and some straw to bind it together, and sometimes some cow dung as well.
Farms and farmhouses here are quite different from in Australia. Whereas in Australia you'll build your farmhouse in the middle of your land and have the land all around you, here all the houses are together in a small village and the land encircles that village. The reason for this is protection from bands of robbers, dacoits as they're called here. There are 600 people in the village. The amount of land averages out to something like 2.5 acres per family. And since they're joint families, that means that grandma, grandfather, children and their children are all living off that tiny bit of land. People can live off 2.5 acres of land because they cultivate it so intensely. Everyone gets 2 crops a year off his land, and sometimes 3 if he sows the right things. For example, you grow oil seeds, lentils of various kinds, wheat, 1 crop a year, sugarcane, which is a whole year's crop. Then in the summer monsoon period, you grow maize and 2 other kinds of grains unique to India, and rice in the late monsoon, and vegetables in small patches in between all the others. And you double crop. In the one field you have 2 crops growing at the same time, but they are of different heights and mature differently. And then of course people's standard of living is much, much lower than ours. And so somehow they manage to survive. And in our village now there are just a few signs of extra prosperity. I can see them because I can see the difference from when I came 5 years ago. And if you go to other villages, the roads there are usually a little worse and there aren't so many brick houses. This, I think, is partly due to my husband's project, because now they have better facilities.
Yes, the things wrong with us in the villages are that there is lack of water available to the fields, that there is lack of fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, lack of good seeds. We know they exist, but we don't get them. That there is lack of money, cash, to invest in it. So these are the few things which are lacking at the moment. And the government claims that we are providing these things to the villages, but in fact they're not. And the little advancement which Indian agriculture has made recently has been made only by the rich section of the farmers, which are very, very few. So my aim here is to concentrate in this area and try to provide these things first. With this, I'm also aiming that the people here can get these things by themselves, and they do not require me. So they require some sort of social awareness and some sort of organization to demand, if these things are not available, then demand from the government and such administration that these things are made available to them.
So in a way, you are what we would call a stirrer.
Yes, you can say so, yes.
It's very important to show people that they can become more prosperous without leaving the village. At the moment, the only hope they see is if they go to the towns. But we have shown this already with at least 2 village boys, that they can improve their standard of living and way of life by remaining in the village. For example, there's Mukat Singh, who was trying from early childhood to emulate my husband. He managed with great difficulty and sacrifice and determination to educate himself to MA standard. He was offered a job in the school, our junior high school, which had just opened then. He proved to be quite a good teacher, and he stayed there ever since. Now he earns that salary, he is still able to farm his little bit of land, and all his family are living in the family home, so he has no rent problem, and consequently he is now much better off than before. Another example is Fitrat Ali, a Muslim boy who had become educated to about 3rd year high school standard, failed his exams there, couldn't find a job, and was really having psychological problems. He was asked to work in the little milk collection centre that opened. We didn't think he'd succeed because we knew the psychological problems he'd had. But once he had a job to do in the village, he was right, and he's been working there for 3 years now without any problems.
India is the world's largest democracy. By law, there are equal rights for all. India is also the land of caste, the old system of classifying people. Caste determines occupation. Priests come from one caste, merchants another, farmers another, and so on. In the cities, the caste barriers are falling, where technology is creating jobs which don't fit the old categories. Personal ambitions are cutting across the caste lines, and society is having to face changes. But that's in the cities, and most Indians live in the villages.
This is the barber's house. This is the barber's wife. Her husband shaves people in the village and goes around when there's a feast, telling them it's time for a feast. And she goes around to the women when they're invited to a feast. This woman is the same caste as we are, Rajputs. That's one of the higher castes. She is sitting higher than this girl because she's higher up in the family, though they're of the same family. And I'm sitting on the charpoy, and the barber's wife is sitting on the ground because my caste, or my husband's caste, is higher than hers. Is anyone? All the rest are just their children, many, many children.
Does the caste thing apply to the children as well? I mean, do they reflect?
No, not so much. You can't really see it very clearly in the children. But the children sort of take it in unconsciously, because as soon as they're big enough, they start acting the same way as their parents do.
How do you react to all this?
Well, now that I've learned what it's all about and what you're supposed to do, I find it difficult not to copy it a bit. I feel embarrassed because I know they'll be thinking, well, she's sitting at the higher end of the charpoy instead of the lower one, and I'm older than her, so she ought to be sitting down the lower end. So when I know they might be thinking that, then I have to fit in and do it their way. But I get away with a lot. They don't expect me to do everything that they do. Because they say you're educated, they put a big price on that. And you're from a rich country where things are different. And then I'm the big boss's wife, so that also makes a difference. All these children and mothers have been to me at some time or other for Tara's old clothes, or for medicine. So this little girl, for example, is 2 years old, but she can't walk on her own yet. She's so weak and thin. And they come along asking have I got any medicine, and I give them whatever I've had for Tara. There is one woman in the village, the tailor's wife, who has had 20 children. She would be about 39 years old now. Of those 20 children, one has survived, the first one a boy. Of the other 19, 3 have died since I've been here. I've seen so many babies die that other women have had, although I think it's partly their fault. They have a sort of fatalistic attitude that it's all up to God and there's not really much they can do. Many non-Indians criticize Indians for having so many children, increasing the population all the time. But what they don't realize is that without a male child, there's no one to work the land, and the entire economy depends upon the land. Until there's something to take the place of agriculture, you can't expect people to stop having children. Similarly, they need someone to look after them in their old age. A poor country can't afford a program of pensions for old people, so there's only the children to look after their parents. thing I've learned from living here for 5 years is that the position of women is still very low, particularly in the villages where women aren't educated. There are a few exceptions, but mostly because men own everything and women are dependent on them, they feel very insecure and uncertain of their futures. For example, Lakshmi, who's sitting near me, she was first married by her father, and her first husband was killed in a raid of dacoits on their village. Now, for a high caste girl to get remarried is very, very difficult, and she's from a high caste. But she was lucky that her father found a widower who wanted to marry again, and for him it is also difficult because he's lost one wife. Now, although her husband is much, much older than she is, 25, 30 years older, they're very well off. She lives in a town, and they have 3 boys, which is a very lucky thing in India, to have boys. So in fact, her life has turned out happily. The next one, Mitlesh, is about 19 and very unusual because she hasn't been married yet, but her marriage has at long last been arranged. She is an interesting girl because her brother committed suicide very tragically last year, and just recently she has begun saying that her brother's spirit has come upon her, and she throws these fits where she talks, or says she talks through her brother, or her brother talks through her. Some people believe this, and of course some people say she's doing it to try and get the land that would have gone to her brother. Now it's got to be divided between the sisters, and they have to decide which sister will go to. The last one, Kusum, has had a rather tragic life in marriage, and to a man who was a widower. And he wasn't a very good chap. He sold all their land and gambled away all their money, and they progressively got poorer and poorer. And she became involved with some other men, and eventually, when she had an affair with a man of another religion, she was thrown out of the village by her husband and the other villagers. So she came back to her parents here. She works literally from dawn till about 10, 11 at night, struggling to keep her family going, her parents and her 2 children and herself. But she's a very quick and efficient worker, very clean, and she's always bright and smiling. And if there's singing and dancing going on in any woman's home, even if it's late at night after she's finished a hard day's work, she'll be the first there and the first to get up and dance. She had 6 children living, 1 died, 4 boys and 2 girls. But she's only hardly 30, younger than I am. Tara is 3.5 years old now. For the last 2 years, all the women in the village have been asking me, when's she going to have her brother or sister? She's getting big now, she can walk on her own 2 feet. Now at last she will be having one soon. And the problem comes, is it going to be a boy or a girl? If it's a boy, everyone will be very happy. All Indian families long for the arrival of a male child. In some castes, the girl children are really badly treated. And a family who has only girls, my husband's cousin's family, for example, with 5 girls, people feel very, very sorry for them. The reason is, of course, all the dowries that have to be paid in marriages. The giving of dowries in marriages has been made illegal here for many years now, but it still occurs in practice everywhere in both cities and villages. Because if you don't give a dowry in your daughter's marriage, you are condemning her to a life of misery in her in-laws' house, because they'll always be dissatisfied. child marriages have also been made illegal for many years, and they are actually slowly disappearing. I've seen very few here. At least girls are 14, 15, 16 before their parents consider marrying them. We have two girls in our family, Urmila and Sushma, who are in fact beyond the age at which a village girl is normally married. Last year, when they were 17 and 18 years old respectively, we tried to find suitable husbands for them. In a village, you just pass the word around, and when you hear of a suitable boy, the girl's father or uncle goes and visits him. But being a fairly educated family for a village, we decided to do what educated people in cities do and advertise in the paper. As a result of the advertisement, however, we got a boy who turned up here in the village himself. I think he had in mind just to have a look around and see if he couldn't get a glimpse at the girl, because normally here you don't see the girl before you're married, ever. There was nobody home that day, no man of the house, my husband wasn't here, who could tell us what to do. And we silly women just let him come and gave him tea and let the girls come and serve him, so he saw them. Well, when my husband got back that evening, when he heard what had happened, there was a terrible to-do, because this is regarded as very insulting. If the boy then says, no, I'm not interested in marrying the girl, then that's a terrible insult, and everybody gets to hear about it here. This year again we're trying, but so far without success, and the time for doing it is nearly over. There's a special season for marriages here. It's all done according to the moon and so on, and different times of the year. And we haven't found anybody that fits in. The subcaste and the caste have both got to be absolutely right. The boy must be more educated than the girl is, and both our girls are now at matriculation level last year of school. So it's become very, very difficult. You cannot live in the village month after month without suffering from lack of intellectual stimulation. You keep a few books around you, and you go and visit a place like Delhi whenever you can afford to. But apart from that, it's not nearly so difficult to live happily in the village as one would imagine. I shouldn't be daunted at the thought of living here for the rest of my life.